Hi, this is Sherry. Welcome to my journey in clay, where we talk about all things pottery related. In my last video, I talked about and made some bisque molds. Bisque molds are made from clay. You fire them once, bisque fire, and then they are ready to go and use. They are especially useful for smaller molds, smaller press molds that you want to make. But for something a little bit bigger, I think plaster frequently works a little bit better, especially if it needs to be a little bit thicker, which is what I want to do today. Now, as far as molds are concerned, there's all types of molds that you can use for pottery. And if you have looked around on YouTube a lot already, you can see that there are hump molds and slump molds to make bowls. There are multi-part molds where you can use a mug or another object to make a mold from it. But today, what we're going to do is a press mold. And that is a mold that we want to use for texture, to make something textured. After we do this mold, I'm going to do another video on how to make a candle house, which is a house that you can put a candle in, either real or artificial, and the roof comes off. So I have two examples here just to give you an idea of what they look like. This is one of the cottages or houses where the roof comes off. This is another one where the roof comes off. Now, this one has shingles that were applied individually. So each of these little shingles was put on by hand. This one is one that I made where I used a mold for the shingles, which I'm really not too happy with. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to make a mold for a shingled roof for either a candle house or maybe a fairy cottage, whatever it is that you have in mind you want to make. To make the mold for the shingle roof, we're going to start off with a flat slab of clay. Doesn't really matter too much how thick it is. This is about 1/4 of an inch. So as I said before, first we have to make the shingled roof, or the piece of it that we're going to use for a mold, and then after that we'll use the plaster. So to start off, I'm just going to act as if I'm actually making a roof. This piece, I don't want this too big because I'm not really going to be using it for larger pieces. So I've got maybe, I don't know, 4.5 by 6 or 7 or so. It's about the size that I need. So to start off, I'm going to scratch the whole entire roof because I'm going to be putting pieces on it. Now for the little shingles, what I do is I have 2 different rollers. I usually just use my big one because this doesn't have to be, well, it doesn't have to be anything. It just has to be little flat pieces of clay. This clay is a little bit soft, but it should work. Once I roll it, I cut it in little squares. The ends have to be even. When I make the shingles, also I make them slightly different sizes because I don't want them all the same. Do a close-up here so you can see exactly what that is. Then after I cut a few pieces, I take my slip and start with the first row. On the first row, I'll just start placing my shingles. Another little tip, when I'm doing my shingles, I hold my finger here. For the plaster mold, it won't make any difference really, but for this it does if you're making an actual roof. I hold my little finger here to keep this from distorting. And then I'll take the shingled piece, this little square, and I'll just line them up. If I come to a place where it's not really going to fit, I have two options. I can either roll a few more shingles and make one a little bit bigger, or I can cut the one I have and make it smaller to fit. In this case, I'm going to cut a bigger one because it's really not that much bigger. I think that'll work out a little better. When I start the next row, I do the same thing. I put my finger over here to keep it from distorting, and then I will slightly overlap. And actually, this time I'll just put the other one on the other side right now. You don't want them to be exact, so you want them slightly overlapping. They can be just a little bit higher or a little bit lower. Okay, I have finished making the shingled roof. Show you what it looks like. This is actually upside down. It's going to look like this because the shingles will be overlapping this way. What we're going to do now is we're going to wait for this to dry a little bit. It doesn't have to be leather hard for us to make a plaster mold, but I don't want it quite this soft, so I want it to be able to hold its shape a little bit more. So we're going to wait about 15-20 minutes, let this get a little bit harder, and then we'll start making our plaster press mold. The shingled roof is a little bit drier now, and I think we are ready to go. So here's what I have for supplies. I have a box, which I have put a trash bag over top of so that we can just throw the plaster scraps away. We can just turn that inside out. I have a little plastic tray that I'm going to put the shingled roof on. I've covered it with plastic wrap. If it does get plaster on it, it'll be fine, but I thought it would be better if I just put that on. So I'm going to take this, put it inside my box here. Then we're going to mix the plaster. First, we're going to take the shingled roof, we're going to put it in here, put some clay around it, then mix the plaster and pour it in. So here we have our box with our plastic tray inside. I'm going to take the shingled roof and lay it down inside the box. Just in case you can't see it there. I'm going to take a piece of clay and make a border all around the piece. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to score and slip. I'm just going to press it around so that it will contain the plaster. Once I use this clay for this plaster mold, it will not be able to use it again because it'll have plaster in it and you can't use it. So if you can see, I think this may be a little bit better. I'm just taking the clay, pushing it up against here, again, just to form a border to hold the plaster. This doesn't have to be neat. I'm using some reclaim clay, which really hasn't been wedged entirely yet. Okay, so what I've done is I've put this clay all around the perimeter of the shingled roof here. I have taken this and angled it slightly outwards, and that is so when I remove the plaster, it will easily come out. We're going to let this harden up for about 15-20 minutes and then come back and do our plaster. All right, our clay has set up a little bit. It's only been about 10 minutes, but honestly, I think it's about ready. So we're going to go ahead and mix our plaster up. Now to mix the plaster, a couple things. First of all, you're going to need a container that is disposable. If it's not disposable, another option is to get a plastic trash bag, line whatever your container is, and then you can just, when you're all done, remove the trash bag and throw everything out. In my case, I have an old milk carton and I can just pitch it when I'm done. You're going to need plaster and water. I have this to scoop my plaster, and you're going to need a measuring cup to measure the water. Let's see, the different ratios of plaster to water. I have read many different things. On my bag of plaster, which is regular plaster, I don't buy special pottery plaster, and the reason why is because this has worked well for me. However, I want to caution you, if you are making other types of molds, it may be much more important for you to use a better grade of plaster. In this case, I'm using plaster I got from Home Depot or Lowe's, whatever, and that will work for me. The ratio I use is approximately 2 parts plaster to 1 part water. I don't measure it exactly, again, because in the nature of the molds that I'm making, it does not have to be as precise. You do want to put your water in first, then your plaster. You want to get it about a cream consistency. I think that's all, so let's go. As I said, you want to start with water first. I'm going to measure my water. You do want to be sure that you make plenty of plaster. It is better to throw a little bit of plaster out than it is to do your mold and find that you don't really have enough plaster, because I've done that and I tried pouring plaster, making it again, pour it on top, and it does not work very well. So make a little extra. I'm going to start with maybe a cup and a half of water. Again, mine is not precise because of the nature of what I'm doing. So I'm going to put my water in first. You always want to put your water in first. Now, my measurement, I have a cup and a half of water, and I want 2 parts plaster. I'm going to change that. I'm going to put 2 cups of water. I don't think that's really quite enough. So let's make it 2 cups. Put another half cup in there. Okay. Alrighty. And 2 parts plaster. So that will be, there's something I forgot to do here. Very important. When you're mixing with plaster, you really do not want to be breathing in plaster. The mask I have is a little bit of overkill, but it's the one I have and the one I use if I'm cleaning the studio or doing other things that make a lot of clay dust. plaster has been mixed. It is a cream consistency. It could be a little thicker, but this should be okay. When you pour it, you want to pour it gently. You don't want to make any splashes, so just, just pour as gentle as possible. Well, as usual, I have way too much plaster, but again, better too much than not enough. I'm going to just gently tap this to get the bubbles out. Maybe just smash a few here. It doesn't really matter too much, the ones on top here. But I don't want bubbles on the bottom where we're going to be pressing the clay. So just kind of jiggle it a little bit. Should get those out. You can see the bubbles rising to the surface, which is good. Then we're going to wait for it to set enough for us to remove the clay. Should be maybe 20 minutes to a half an hour. I'll time it and we'll see. It has been about maybe half an hour and this feels firm. So what we're going to do, one of the advantages of having clay around it and having the whole thing of clay is that it's very easy to remove. You don't need any sort of someplace, or sometimes if you're doing a mold, you'll use Vaseline or something so that it releases. But we don't need a release agent for clay because we're just going to take it apart. And again, we cannot reuse this clay. The clay will have to go in the trash. So we're going to take this apart. To me, this is the beauty of doing it in clay. It's a little bit wasteful for the clay, but it's very easy to take apart. All right, let's see what we have. Okay. And then we will just peel this off. Voila! So we have completed our plaster mold for the shingle roof, and in the next video we will make a candle house. I'll show you how to do that, how to make a candle house where we remove the lid, and we will be using the shingle mold as we do that. All right, thanks for watching.